Everyone, welcome to Talks at Google. I'm Alan Seals, and just ahead of when you're going to need to know this, if you have any questions today for our guests, please drop them in the right side of the screen. And in the chat window, we'll be pulling questions out of the chat later on in the event. So I am delighted to discuss the recently released hit animated movie Sing 2, which was just released in theaters this past Christmas and is now available on video on demand everywhere you find your movies. One of my kids' favorites, one of my personal favorites as well. In no particular order, our first guest today is Matthew McConaughey, an Academy Award-winning actor, philanthropist, professor, director, and author. He is the voice of Buster Moon, our lead within the movie, and the koala who seems to live off an ability to manifest anything into existence. Our second guest is Garth Jennings, who is also an award-winning actor, director, producer, and screenwriter. The films he's directed include The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So, Garth, we're going to be besties because that's another one of my favorite movies. Son of Rambo, Sing, and of course Sing 2, in addition to being the writer for both of the Sing movies. Matthew and Garth, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you both to Talks at Google.
Great to be here with you, Alan.
Well, it's an incredible movie. Of course, it's building off the success of Sing 1, which we're going to get into this because you were, I think before Sing 1 was finished, you had already started the ideas for Sing 2. But exactly for what Matthew just said, my first question literally was for you, Garth, was about where the genesis came from. What was the idea? Because like Matthew said, every single character is so unique in overcoming their own little struggle and their own fear of something in some way they have to get over.
Yeah. They're super simple in a way. Each little story is very simple because you've got to be able to track multiple stories. They can't be too complex. But yeah, I remember when I first met Chris Meledandri, this is over 10 years ago now, I think, to talk about, he invited me to come and meet him and talk about a possible project he had in mind. And we talked about music and animation and the kinds of musicals that we were both loved. And one of them we talked about was the Commitments. I loved that movie, and I loved how it was the music was in the characters' lives as opposed to, a burst into song musical, and how they all had their own little stories. They had all their own reasons why this music was important to them. Do you know what I mean? And so even though we talked about talent shows, we realized quite quickly we didn't want the format. We didn't want the judges. We didn't want that's all great, but we didn't want to make a movie about judges and stuff. What we loved is seeing how the music could affect characters' lives and take them from the ordinary to the extraordinary. And so that's kind of where it started. And finding, something that would resonate with each one of them. It just began as a very playful conversation about characters and music and what it could mean to everybody.
So why each character in the specific animal that they have, right? Like why does Matthew McConaughey deserve? Why does he get to be a koala and Reese Witherspoon gets to be a pig?
They're always kind of caricatures of the personality. And they either accentuate it or like sort of so for instance, like the shyest character in the movie is an elephant called Mina. She's the biggest character in the entire cast. You can't miss her. Her shyness is magnified. Matthew's character drives everything. Buster Moon is like the most driven character in the whole thing, but he's also the smallest character of all the characters in the main cast. It's very important that he's not just some big guy who can walk in and dominate the scene. He really has to work wherever he goes. So the animals came from imagining what would be an extension of that personality or some aspect of their personality. So they're not literal. Like I know a lot of people in Australia were very upset that this wasn't given, that the koala didn't have an Australian accent. But they don't seem to mind that all the other animals didn't have their regional accents. It was just the koala.
Yeah. They own that animal now. Yes, indeed. I had quite a few talks about the Australian accent in the press that we've been doing.
Was there ever a talk of you putting on an Australian accent, or was just this is me, this is who I am?
There wasn't, but then again, that's, and I've been saying that's the fun of doing these recordings. You cannot screw up. The recorder's on, Garth's there, do it in an Australian accent, say it in Spanish, say it backwards, whisper it, yell it. The one where you screw up, and make a fool of yourself in the recording is the one that after I'm done, I giggle and go, well, you got a big dream, big dream. That's the take we'll use coming off the giggle.
Yeah.
I did something silly. The next take is the one we used. So the freedom of it. But no, there was never any really serious talk about, hey, let's do this in an Australian accent.
No.
Well, where in the process, I guess the timeline, did all of this fall into place? Because it sounds like the two of you have known each other for a long time. Did you know each other before the connection of Sing One, or you're just friends now because of that?
We bonded over a koala. That was it was Sing that brought us together many, many years ago now. And it's been amazing from my point of view to work with someone like Matthew has been a joy from start to finish, because you don't just come in and do a great job. You've been such a supporter of the project as well. Do you know what I mean? You go above and beyond, which is more than I could ever ask for. And my only regret with all this stuff is it all happens too fast and I don't get to hang out and chat. Like even when we were doing press, it would see each other, whoosh, you're gone. And at least on a set, you do get those moments when you're waiting for a lighting setup to change. You do get to say, so what are you doing? And how does this work? Or I always wanted to ask you about that movie you made. We don't get that time.
True.
But certainly you get a lot of energy in those recording sessions. I mean, they're amazing. They've been amazing.
Well, so the process then of you've got the script, you're in development, and Illumination, of course, comes on, and these days, I feel like to get something widely distributed, you need this big budget sort of push behind you, right, from a big studio like this. So at what point does the talent come on? Is the script finished? Does the studio dictate one thing or the other? And then this is leading into, Matthew, how you ultimately got involved with the process as well.
I can give you a short answer to the beginning. I was brought on as a writer only. Originally, I was just going to be writing a story for Illumination. I fell in love with it at the same time as they could see that there was a possible potential for me to move to Paris, where their animation studios are. And by the time I'd moved there, it was just being made. It was just starting to happen. And the writing has been running simultaneously with design and storyboarding and rewriting and going back. So all of it just started to move at once, which I've never experienced in live action before. You normally have to nail this thing down before someone starts building anything. But no, we were starting to work on it immediately. And that rolled into casting. That rolled, within a year, I think we were talking to, I think Chris Meledandri had come to meet Matthew.
Yeah, you might be able to help me with this timeline, Garth. But so Chris Meledandri and I met. I was interested in animation. I've got children by this time in my life. I remember sitting there, and I still make this joke for years. It's like, so what's your favorite film you your kids that you've made, Matthew? Like, they haven't seen any. They haven't made me see. So yeah. I've done some animation, a couple before I just started. I really loved it. Loved the process of it, the freedom of it. And this script came. I was it was pretty much a no-brainer for me. And then what was the beginning? I mean, Garth, you and I, we found the voice of Buster.
Yes. I came out to see you in Austin. Yeah. And we had where I met you for the first time, and then we just started playing around with it. And it was literally the opening scene of the first film where the character is providing a voiceover and saying why he fell in love with the theater. And we were trying it with energy, we were trying it with that. And then it became this kind of almost like this bedtime story voice and this very lyrical, colorful charm and it just kept rolling from there. It was like a minute we both started to hear it, like, oh, that's it. Let's do that. And it's been like that all the way through, like, oh, what did you just do? That thing you just did. Let's do more of that. And what's great is, Matthew, you've never been afraid to just go, try here, try that. You've never got stuck with any one thing. It's always been like, well, what if we did it this way? What if we did it that way? And it's had such a huge impact on the way we process the story and give energy to those things. That energy you put out is crazy.
Well, you and I met Minds early on, and it was obvious from the first hour that we met in the studio. It was like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. He thinks what's funny is the same thing I think's funny. He thinks what's sincere and earnest is what I think is Buster's sincere and earnest. So the trust was there very quickly, which you had an idea. I'm going to, hell yeah, like I said, it's free. Lay it down. If I had a new idea, we go back. There's a lot of the nonverbal things would show up, as I said, in mistake. That Garth would go, wait, what was that thing that happened right before that one? Da, da, da. Try that.
Yeah, because you would do things like little whistles between takes. You go, or something like that, just as you were idling going through pages. And I think that sounds great. Let's do that again. There was a lot of your spontaneous stuff that became, part of that character's fabric that we really, really did make a point of putting in. In a weird way, talking about it now, it was like the weirdest blind date I've ever been on. And it's like a non-romantic blind date where you turn up, you don't know the person, and the two of us have to kind of find a common ground, a common language through a koala instead of a meal.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, do you so they record, I don't know if you know this was surprising to me. There's a camera in those recording sessions. So when us performers are over there doing the voice work, you're also doing physical work. Do you keep eyes? Do you have a team over there, Garth, that's looking at physical things that you may do that you go, that's a consistent thing. We should give that to the character.
Yeah, it's the number one priority for that video recording is lip sync. So we're really sure we've got the lip sync. But then you always were doing things that we would be able to, with your body as you're conjuring up a line or getting into a scene, you'd be doing something that very often was pulled into the character, that the animators would see something you were doing that they would never think to do. Obviously, a lot of times your character, you're literally having to stand at a microphone and your character is supposed to be running down the street. So there's a great disparity between you and what's got to be in the movie. But no, it's amazing how much of those inflections, those tiny choices, those physical subconscious things you're doing would work their way into the performance in the animation.
Well, that's what makes the character a lot more real, because there's something that I want to give James Cameron credit where credit is due for Avatar, right? Because when you're filming the face. He's got the camera in front of the face, because a lot of the criticism behind animation up until the recent years has been that the soul is lost because the eyes don't look real, the eye movements. Right. And so now with the cameras in the animation booths or the voiceover booths, and the animators taking that into pulling in micro expressions. It's such an important thing to make these characters real. And then for you and your team, Garth, to translate that into these animals that, of course, have to defy our imaginations because real animals don't sing and dance. It's just like, major kudos to you and the team. And of course, your cast.
The team thank you. That's very kind. And my team deserve it. They are extraordinary. And they do. I mean, every character from the first movie got an overhaul in terms of its nuance. There were like hundreds more movable parts in the faces and opportunities for expression. And they're always, I never knew I'd have so many opinions on where an eyebrow should be, or like shoulders. Shoulders can tell you so much, that tension or not, or the breathing. And so much work goes into sort of invisible stuff, but that just makes you feel like they're really there. They're really in that moment. And that is, I have to say, as someone who wasn't in animation before, has been one of it never ceases to amaze me and be a kind of miraculous part of the process. It really is. When you see it, you've had Matthew's voice, you've had it for 3 months, and then you've got this sort of virtual puppet. Then somebody 3 months later says, here it is speaking. It's magical, genuinely magical.
So Matthew, for you then, you're in the booth by yourself and you're not reading with the other actors. It's much different than a live action movie where you're filming it, and you're known for a lot of improvisation, famously like the Wolf of Wall Street, like the vocal warm up you do. People still talk about that all the time, and Garth was just talking about things you're doing for yourself in between takes that get used, but. Are you thinking about that when you're laying down your performance? Are you just going in and you're like, I have 5 different choices and I'm going to give them all over right now? Or what's going into being by yourself? Because I don't think, especially in COVID times, and we'll get to this, how COVID affected production, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you probably have been with the full cast at all.
No, never.
Yeah.
Never. And even in the recording, a lot of times I think, weren't you, Garth? in Paris. I was in Austin. You're on a screen. We weren't even in the same room. You and I weren't even in the same room.
No.
We're recording Sync. It's a lot of Sync 2, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Garth will read, so they offer someone else, another actor or actress, to come in and read other lines. That can work. That can also, for me, be a little odd because it feels like it got formal. Garth is very good at reading anybody's lines. He actually does all the voices. That's another story, but he's the voice of Miss Crawley, right?
Miss Crawley, yeah.
But I believe he does all the voices, and they ended up saying you got to be Miss Crawley, but he does. So he'll read, and then sometimes I'll just self-start myself. I'll just do the monologue. I'll read the other, mumble through or read as the other character to kickstart myself, and I'm more relaxed in responding to myself reading the other character. And almost a monologue.
I always loved it when you did that. I used to love it. It was like a magic trick. I'd be sitting there thinking, okay, do I need to read now? And you would just read the other part and then snap back into your bit. And it was always great. I was like, oh, it's perfect. That's going to fit in nice.
For me, it would loosen up and give me a little boomerang effect, a little something to rubber band back off of.
I always liked it when you would do a Gunter line as well, because you did you had a good. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm fine. How are you?
And then you would come back and answer that. Yeah.
And it's just as I said, you can't screw up. And if you get that, for me, it was finding the music. As soon as Garth and I found the music, and I came in with this idea that Buster's inflections, if you deconstruct optimism and inspiration and hustle, his inflections at the end of sentences are not where mine are. I have a tone that lilts down and is relaxing. Buster is always, we're going up. We got to go. We're going to have an inflection that goes up because we're on to the next thing. And this is how it's going to be. And we're going to make it. So as soon as that sort of meter hit, I was like, that's pretty consistent with all of Buster's approach to who he is coming out of his words. Once that music was locked and I was like, yes, and Garth was like, yes, then it was just getting back to that and having nuances on that. Because like in Sing 2, Buster has to, he's in a bind a lot more than he was in Sing 1. He's got a lot more moments where he's vulnerable, and this may be the end. And I don't know, I've got self-doubt. I can't believe anymore. What are we gonna do? Maybe I thought it was too much. So we got a lot more of those moments in Sing 2, but they're still all informed by that. How do you keep the belief through the self-doubt? How do you have the friends? How do you convince yourself? How do you have your friends and your team come to lift you up and get you back up to who you are and who's the best of you? How we're ever going to pull this thing off? How do you write checks you don't know if you can cash and just say, let's see.
Well, it seems like it parallels so much of your sort of overall personality too, because there's a lot of manifestation that I feel like you have put out in the world and then gone after. You're like, well, this is what I'm going to do, so I'm going to go do it. And like I've showed up here, so now I got to deliver. All right, here we go. And that's Buster Moon.
Yeah.
Right? Like McConaughey and Moon are very similar individuals.
Well, sure. I mean, I'm sure that's part of the reason they came to me for that. It's a part that I would have been foolish to not say, hey, let's lean into that side of me. I love to pull things off. I love to write checks that I don't know if I've got the money in my account to cash and go, let's see.
The trick is, though, what you do inadvertently, though, is make it endearing instead of irritating. Like that guy could be in someone else's hands just annoying, but it has such warmth to it as well. It's coming from a good place. So even if he's sneaking into a building, which is technically trespassing, it's even illegal. You should maybe be arrested. You're with him because the root of what he's doing is so charming and endearing and good. That for me is the biggest magic trick, that all of this is so infectious. That optimism is so infectious. That for me is the best part about it. Yeah.
I love that. That's very true, because you're right. Moon is carrying a lot of the story, and you're right. If it was somebody who took it to a place of like, I don't like them, they're just getting in trouble again, that wouldn't carry me. But we're rooting for Buster, because everything he does is for the good of his friends, is for the good of making the world a better place. And it speaks to the writing, of course. Like I still can't say enough things about positive things about both of you. You're both just incredible talents. But
Thank you.
Well, there's no
nice way to end my week. This is great. This is lovely. Thank you.
And scene. Okay.
Cheers.
So
I've got tea. You've got something better, but cheers.
Oh yeah.
Oh
I've got a
yeah.
little
Cheers.
glass of
Here,
wine.
here you go. I got my
Cheers,
water.
guys.
My water. There we go.
Oh,
Water,
I think
tea, and wine.
I think I won the competition.
I'm
Cheers.
jealous of Garth. Yes.
Talk about the song choice, Garth, because this is very American pop culture, and from Sing 1 and Sing 2 going into this. So were you part of the song choice? How did it come about? That getting permission to use the songs, the arrangements.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest draws. The magnetic draw was the music, the opportunity to work with so much music and such a broad spectrum. That's been my entire life, really. Ever since I can remember. My parents were big music fans, especially my mum. It was on all day long, very loud, and every kind of music. And then as I was at art school, I started making music videos through the 90s with my friends. So film and music was just like, that was it. That was everything. So to do that on this scale was like the dream job. And as far as the sort of pop culture thing, I'm so used to, as a Brit, listening to everything, and a lot of that came from America. I mean, we made a lot as well, of course, but a lot of it, so it was just all part of the whole mesh of things. And so you could listen to Frank Sinatra, or you'd be listening to David Bowie, or it didn't matter, or like the latest Taylor Swift thing that just was fabulous and infectious, and you couldn't resist it. It just felt like an opportunity to embrace that spectrum of music, especially as things have got quite, can get quite secular, can't they? They can get just this, you either like this genre or that genre. And I grew up loving the charts were mad through the 70s and the 80s. You go back and look at the charts, the range of music just in the top 10 was very eclectic. And one of the great joys of the first Sing movie was seeing how much people loved that spectrum of music. They weren't put off by it. They weren't put off by a rock track and then a dance track and then a classic and then something you've never heard of, like some weird Brazilian version of a Daft Punk song. It was like, if it was good and it worked in the moment, people would feel endeared by it and or towards it. And we got to do that, to take that to the next level with Sing 2. Obviously, we were able to take confidence from that. So like you can have 2.5 minutes of a Mercury Rev song on a bus with no dialogue and feel confident that it works. So the audience will hopefully feel as much love for it as I do. But this music would start with the script. It's being written into the story as I'm going along. Ambitions for it. They'll change as we go along, but the ambitions are always there from the beginning,
So is it
Prince's Let's Go Crazy right the way through.
Is it in the script? Is it like inspirational song goes here, or is it specific song by specific person gets inserted here?
Normally I'll start with something specific, like Prince's Let's Go Crazy. It was like, okay, it's Prince, Let's Go Crazy, and it's Alice in Wonderland. So this line, this happens, this, I'll break it down just like I would have done a music video. Like every second, I know what's got to happen. And then what will happen sometimes with that one, we got it. But sometimes you'll get a song and you'll try it in storyboards and you'll go, the song doesn't work here, or the one before it's too similar, so we have to change it. But I'll always start with something specific in the script. Like you've got your stake in the ground. Okay, that's the song to beat. That's going to hold it, and then you go from there.
Well, speaking of songs, right? I think this is a great segue into Bono, because I mean, real quick, for those who haven't seen the first one, the core cast, of course, Matthew McConaughey, Scarlett Johansson, Tori Kelly, Taron Egerton, Reese Witherspoon, Nick Kroll, Seth MacFarlane, Nick Offerman, and then Sing 2 has added people like Halsey, Bobby Cannavale, Pharrell Williams, of course, Bono, a whole slew of others. And I was reading, like, my God, this is reading like a cast list of who's who, right? And it's singers who have turned into actors and actors who you've turned into singers.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it works. Oh my God. I just love, side note, I love this movie so much. Can you tell? If I didn't have kids, I would be in love with it anyway, because I've got the musical theater side of it. We will get in the musical theater side because I want the show with Clay Calloway. I want that in Vegas. That show's got to happen.
Yes, that would be great. I would be up for that.
And headlining with Matthew McConaughey, of course, headlining. But getting these people, these actors, I guess the part of it was knowing what songs you wanted. Then there was what characters are going to sing them, and then there, like, for Sing 2, you bring Bono in, who voices a character and gives you the rights to use these iconic U2 songs, and then writes an original song without being asked. He offers up this original song, which is now up for, I'm looking forward to my notes, up for Best Original Song in the Oscars, right?
I don't know if it's been announced as a shortlist thing yet. I think it's in the long list or something like that. But yes, all of that stuff you just said is entirely true. It's extraordinary. And I don't know what the question is, but hooray to all of that.
Oh, the question then is, the original question is, how are you deciding what character sings what? But then back to casting, how do you know, like, that Reese can sing? How do you know that Scarlett Johansson can sing? Of course we know Tori Kelly. Of course we know Halsey.
I mean, we'd heard Reese singing in Walk the Line. Scarlett's had numerous albums. I've forgotten, who is it she's duetted with? I want to say John Mayer, but I think I've got that wrong. Anyway, I've heard her singing, and I've heard her singing in movies as well. Even in Her, she does a little song, just that lovely song that Karen O wrote. The only actor who came on board that was going to sing that I didn't know could sing was Taron Egerton, and he came in and auditioned, and he just stood in front of a mic and did an a cappella soul song, and he was fantastic.
Of course.
And so, and then with Bono, I can't even believe I'm saying that, but anyway, I knew that songs would be fantastic, and I knew he had that voice. But he came in and sort of did a test. He wanted to just do a kind of like an audition / test to make sure that, like, you know how Matthew and I were talking about finding the voice for Buster Moon? He wanted to go on that process first and be sure that we were both happy with what we were getting and that there wasn't a gap between both of our desires. And we found it. Just with my phone, I remember just him holding my phone and just going around his living room, and I was acting out the rest of the characters, and he was being Clay Calloway, and found it. And so it's sort of like a playful process. There's never been a sort of one rule that fits everybody, gosh, it's worked. It's worked ever so well. But I think it's the fact that everyone had so much love for the first film. It gave them confidence to go for it in this one, I suppose.
You know, the second film, this one, you list all those names. I've seen sequels, we all have, where all of a sudden you go, okay, the first one worked, the next one's got to be bigger, better. Let's just chalk it full, and they can feel over bloated and at the expense of story. That's one of the great things you pulled off. Everybody's got an identity. Everyone's got an original perspective. Everyone's original character in this, and you look at it, and you go, how are you going to fit all that into one film? How are you going to fit all those songs and have them not just be throwaways? And how do you not have those songs just because we can have them? Everything's got every song's got a purpose and a meaning. Every character, it could feel over bloated, but it doesn't. And you pulled something off that's tough to do. Especially.
Thank you. I think it's a that's very kind of you to say, and I'm glad you feel that way about it as well, especially given how much you put into it. But I think that the team who've worked on this are just extraordinary, and they've helped refine that rhythm of going from one to the other, when to leave, when to come back, keeping it simple but keeping it emotionally tethered. And those music choices aren't thrown in ever. They are like, they have to serve a purpose, even if they're funny. It's still got to be absolutely locked in. So I'm really, it's been a long time. I guess that's what happens if you spend 4 years making a movie. You should get it right.
The realism behind all of it is incredible to me. This is what I was talking about a second ago with the theater aspect. And there's so much of this that I can see that was taken from real life. And I've actually got a clip of your choreographer talking, one of the special behind the scenes things of the choreographer. I'm looking for her name. Yeah, Sherry Silver.
Sherry Silver.
So Sherry Silver, with the side by side of the choreography that she made with the way it translated into the animation. And we'll play that in a second because I think it's fascinating. But I want you to touch on real fast, I guess, take us in behind the scenes when you were talking about, like, all right, so we're doing the show within the show. It's got to be bigger.
Yeah.
We're doing this city that's supposed to be Las Vegas, where everything is so big. You got to go big or go home. And every single bit of what we were seeing about the rehearsal process for the show within the show, and all the behind the scenes inside the movie of Sing 2 is so realistic. You must have had effort and consultations and on-site visits to theaters, and like, how did you put all this together for Sing 2?
It's mainly based on just being in youth theater as a kid, being the sound guy. I was the sound guy, and falling in love with being part of a group of people putting on a show. I absolutely love that, and it's one of the reasons why I love film so much, and all those little behind the scenes things and those connections we have with each other. And then as far as when it got to making the sequel, and we knew that we were going to put on a big show at the end, because in the first film, they've barely got a stage. I think they've got a piano and some cardboard. There's nothing. This one, it's like, okay, well, it has to be as good as a Cirque du Soleil show. So we can't just phone that in. It has to be rooted in something, really real. So all the costumes were designed by Rodarte. All the choreography was Sherry Silver, because we had to start with something like when I've got Matthew doing the voice of Buster, so I've already got this. That's that. So I need the similar level of talent to influence and sort of guide us in those other areas. So Sherry, who is incredible, came in and we worked very sort of playfully for a few days with some dancers, and it was brilliant how quickly she pulled it together. And we instantly had that thing, exactly what Matthew talked about earlier, that connection where you're trying to find that, what's the thing we want, and then you get it, and then you're done. And it's not motion capture, but it is like it has an energy and a personality like that. If we can capture that in the animation, then it will feel good in the movie.
Oh, yeah. Right. I think one of the great examples, it's not motion capture. One of the great examples is like when the breakdancer is spinning on his head. I don't know what that move is called, but then of course the animated character is going because in animation you can do it super fast, faster than physics would allow in the real world.
I nearly had a heart attack when that man spun around on his head. I felt like his dad. I was like, stop doing that. You're going to snap your head off. It was really troubling. And I'm going to play. You could just keep going.
Well, it's so interesting to be. So you've got the choreography. Of course, you've got the singing and these original arrangements and Bono writing original songs. And so putting it all together, the sets. Did you do actual set design, like 3D models or models of the set? Because for Broadway shows, you make them to scale.
Yeah, I mean, oh, you mean did we build them in reality?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. No, we didn't build them as like in a room, but they were all built like virtually and designed as if it was a real Vegas show. It had to have, show where the moving parts were. And because the movie is always embracing what's going on behind and how one thing connects to another, everything was, all the wires, like even at the end when you see the characters going up on the glass, it's like, where the wires are, where the pulleys are. So the whole thing has to kind of work. If anyone wants to put the Sing 2 show on, we've got it ready to go. It's ready to go. But it's an awful lot of design and then some cheating, but stage risers and dry ice and stuff. And everything has to go somewhere and feel like you're adding wobble and adding tension. So it's not quite perfect. It makes it a little more charming that you can kind of see things, especially in the opening thing with Alice in Wonderland. You can see the kind of set kind of not quite able to, it's not quite Vegas. It's not there yet. It's a little, rough around the edges.
Right. Matthew, when you first saw it, I mean, you go in, you do your I don't know how long the voiceover process was, weeks or months, but you go in, you lay it down, and then you go away for a couple years, I want to say, right? And then you are like, does Garth call you up? Somebody calls you up and you're like, hey, I got a rough cut for you. Come check it out.
No, not quite a rough cut. But you are building it. Each session, you're helping Garth and the team build the movie. Meaning, this is what I mean. In a live action, you go and you do your performances, you do them on the day, you leave those scenes behind. Sometimes you have a reshoot where you go back and reshoot a scene. Maybe you have a reshoot where you write new scenes to help the story along. What I noticed we did, Garth, in this process is you do one scene, you're looking, then taking it back with all the other performances, and you're going, you know what, this scene isn't quite working. We're going to kind of rewrite it. We're going to kind of rejigger this scene a little bit. We would go back and do the same scene and with tweaked dialogue many times. And that weren't necessarily coming back a year later doing new scenes as much as you were going, you know what, that scene that we did, there's a new version of it. Here's what really it. Here's what it means. Here's what we need. We noticed at this point in the movie, we need a downbeat because we're about to fly into act 3.
Yeah.
And the recording we did before, we thought that might be, it was maybe too up. It didn't land. Let's do the same thing. And so just massaging it, but correct me if I'm wrong, Garth, that's what you're building the story more so in animation through the production than you are in live animation. Would that be fair?
You're exactly right, Matthew. It's like Alan, you were saying at the beginning, how does it start? And I was saying, everything's going at once. The writing, the recording, the storyboarding, character design. And so we're all, not just us, not just the animation team, but Matthew and the rest of the cast are helping us find and whittle away at this thing. You've got an emotional goal and a specific place to get to, but you keep finding ways to refine and make it better, especially when you've got multiple storylines that have to weave in and out of each other. You often find there's an energy thing, or there's a tone that's repetitious, and so you have to kind of correct that and go back and open it back up again with Matthew, and then we'll talk about like, okay, well, the scene was great, but now it's on a bus, right. It's got a different tone now, or Buster needs to be more downbeat, and I'd asked for something more energetic before. It's that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I guess what I was getting at was visually, right? Because if you're coming back in and you're like, okay, this scene that we did before was on a boat, now it's on a bus. Are you able to? Do you have that like a rough render that Matthew? Are you looking at something, or are you just looking at storyboards? Or because my question then was, I was getting at like, how did you feel when you frickin' saw this movie for the first time? Because I feel like for you there was a lot of gap between rough to finished, whereas the production team, of course, is seeing it in iterations.
Well, so for instance, each time I come back to record, Garth is showing me the next version, the closer version. It starts off, you walk in, remember the first day, you got some rough pictures of all the characters. There's a book.
Yeah.
You're kind of seeing what the characters look like. That's kind of all you have. Then you do a scene and you're seeing some scribbles of here's kind of what the scene would feel like. Garth is telling me the screen direction, we're envisioning the world. And then the next time he comes back, I've got a visual that's a little more rendered, that's a little more realistic, that they've taken to the next step. The next time you come back, oh, this is really coming together. We're going to show you the parts of this scene, and you start to see it's evolving and being made in front of me. So each time I'm coming back, I'm seeing the film and the scene more rendered, if that's the right word.
So did you see it in any, or I guess how long was it between your last studio session and final product?
Oh, geez, what was it, Garth? I mean, you and I did a session.
It's probably at least
over a year.
I reckon it's probably a year between you finishing and you seeing it. I think
right.
At least.
So then now these are movies your kids can see.
Yes.
They are probably your biggest critics. Like walking out of the movie with your kids. What was that? How was that?
One. So I've had a moment in Scene 1 and in Scene 2 that I cherish. They know after Scene 1 was easier because they didn't know. They weren't in the studio. They after Scene 1 they got to go to the studio. We took them over to Paris. They've seen the movie. They know their dad's Buster Moon, etc. But there's a moment in scene 1 and in scene 2, watching for the first time with my children. They're sitting to the left, some to the left, some to the right. Buster Moon comes on screen. I think that's my dad's voice. I could see him looking at me. And then looking back at the screen, looking at me, looking back at the screen. And then I go on and on and on and on. And all of a sudden I'll hit one note or one word where they know it's their dad. And they're like, bye-bye. I'm like, yeah. And then I'm in. And then I'm kind of, I'm for a moment. That's you. That's you. That lasts for, I don't know, 30 seconds. And then their favorite characters become somebody other than Buster Moon, inevitably, in both of these. They like Buster Moon. I've got more street cred at the dinner table now. Thank you, Garth. But I've got a youngest that the inchworm that comes out. He likes just the little nuggets where they come in with one little chorus, and it's a character. The snail. My son Livingston's favorite character is the snail. He's in that on the cell phone for like 8 seconds. That's his favorite character. This last one, they picked out different characters they like. They like who's the blonde Broadway Tony Award winning Fabio character.
That's Eric Andre's character, Darren.
He's the big deal. They love him. And they get different characters they like. I've never been their favorite character, but I've got a little more credence in the household since it's being Buster Moon.
Side note, Garth, you are now the reason my 5.5-year-old wants to take piano because his favorite character is Johnny. So look at how many children
I'm very happy to hear that
you are bringing into music. And so thank you for that, because this gets them.
It's amazing. It's one of the greatest bonuses that I never anticipated was the reaction after the first film came out. The first preview with children just dancing in the cinema, I'm not exaggerating, it was phenomenal. And I was so thrilled. But then what happens is the children watch it a lot at home and they start to like the idea of having a guitar or playing a piano. And
my daughter's
how many times since that
Ash because of Ash.
Really?
Yeah. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that story or been sent I either get, if I hear I'm Still Standing one more time, I'm going to throw my TV out the window because their children play it to death. Or it's, they're learning guitar now, or they're learning piano. I love that. Isn't that wonderful? Like this wonderful positive byproduct that no one anticipated. It's great.
Sky Full of Stars is now the new repetitive song in our household, in our car, of course, because they ask for it all the time.
I want to bring up one cool thing. One cool thing. You were talking about Bono earlier. And in the first, you talk about all the different eclectic genres in Sing 1 and how they travel, and some of the new genres the younger generation even saw. And it's like, I like that music. I like a crooner. I like that jazz, whatever that was. There's another great example in Sing 2 of you've got classic U2 songs, Still Haven't Found One. I'm looking for, you've got a couple that we all know from, 30 years ago, Joshua Tree? But yet they're being introduced for the first time to generations right now. And I've had a really great time hearing younger people go, that's my favorite song. That Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Is that? And their minds going, I'm going to go to the charts. Is that today's #1 hit? And you're like, no, that was a hit that many decades ago. And it's another testament to how great music of any time or any genre can stand the test of time and can still be introduced as brand new later on Virgin Ears.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
true.
brilliant.
It's lovely.
It's absolutely brilliant. So we're going to get into audience questions here in a second. So if you've got any questions, drop them in the chat over there on the right. And while we're waiting for questions to come in real quick, I just need to put the rumor mill to rest, Garth. Did Mike get eaten at the end of Sing 1?
No, Mike is still alive somewhere out there. I think Mike is one of those guys that just makes it through everything. And I like the idea that one day maybe we could find a way to bring him back. I don't know. he was such a lousy character in the way he should be. Do you know what I mean? He was so disliked, especially when he was brilliant at singing. It was like, it was a good reason to move him out of Sing 2. But I do like the idea that one day we might find that he's still alive. And I remember writing a scene once with him in, as far as where his life had gone to. We didn't use it obviously, but I'd love to be able to pick that up one day. I'm not doing any more Sing movies, but I love the idea that that could happen again. Yeah, he could come back.
Yeah, and that final tableau at the end. Yeah, the final tableau at the end of Sing 1, where you see everybody after the theaters open. Mike's not in that picture, so like the rumor mill on the internet is like he got eaten. The bears got him. Bears got him. All right, so
yeah. Well, I think that could have been what happened, but I have a feeling he made it through. I think he got away with that.
Fair enough. All right, let's take our first audience question. So Sherry wants to know, as a parent, it's so great to continue to see these types of movies that teach life lessons to the younger generation. Do you have a process of how you fold that into a movie? I guess that's for you, Garth.
For me, well, that's lovely that you feel that, and it's important to us that the movie is more than just movement and color and song. You know, it has to mean something, and of course, telling stories about characters who are trying to fulfill their potential, or even just admit to it, find it, and try to go that distance. You're going to create something that is, you know, you're straying into territory that is universal. These are issues for all of us. Obviously, we're not porcupines and koalas, but the idea of somebody telling you you're not good enough to do the thing you want to do. I mean, these are all things that resonate very much with all of us. And certainly with Buster Moon at the center of it, it was really important that, you know, it's all very well to say, you know, dream big dreams, but you better be ready, you know, you need guts, stamina, and faith. You can't just get there on dreams alone, and you need friends. And I think it was important to try and get those themes into the movie without it feeling like medicine, without it feeling like, okay, we got to stop now and hear the, you know, the moral of the story. It's like it should just be part of the fabric, and just feel like it's there, inherently there.
Well, that feeling and the behavior is inherently there in everybody in society anyway. So you just made something that was real. I feel like it's really that simple. If I were to be so bold as to say that's the recipe.
Well, that's wonderful that you feel that. And it is important that it resonates, because when you get to the end of the movie and everyone's singing, or Buster is facing his nemesis for the last time, if you wouldn't feel anything there if there weren't those thematic elements, if there weren't those truths. Right. Because you can't just sing a song and hope that everyone feels something. It's got to mean something. So it has to be something you relate to. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I think we only have time for one more question. We've chatted for so long. So let's take one more. Corey says, Matthew, I imagine you work on multiple projects in parallel. Are there challenges in switching between characters and contexts?
Oh, yes, but not as much as I give them credit for. I really like to do one thing at a time and have a minimum of 3 months for preparation, and then I come out of a character, and it usually, you know, takes me a month to shake it. But that's luxurious talk. I found that I'm actually to go from project to project. I do not like overlap parallel. I don't like working on two movies at the same time. I mean, like, I don't like performing in one on the day, then coming home and writing another one at the same time. I do like one at a time. But I found that when I go back to back, I talked about being a boomerang and that rubber band process of recording, where you go one way and you make a mistake and you come back and the next take's the one you use. In the work that I'll do, if I go back to back shows, my instrument's lubricated already. And I'll find that if I I like going from a drama to a comedy, or a comedy to a drama. It's a further distance to go, but I can come out of the deep drama and springboard off that, because I'm craving for some lightness. I'm craving some comedy, that I'll come in with a very romantic view and sensational view of the opposite, which is, say, if I'm going to comedy, that would be the opposite of some heavy drama, and vice versa. I'll finish a comedy and I'll follow that up with the drama. I like that distance, a further distance to go, but my instrument's already lubricated. And I come into it sort of feverishly wanting the genre or the context, the tone of what it is I'm going through that may be opposite of what I just did.
That's really cool. It's the balance, the yin and the yang. I mean, it's perspective, right? I think you're going to be a better, happier person if you just played a sad person, or vice versa, right? So you've got perspective on where you've come from and where you're going.
And
so
you need them
actor,
both. You need them both. I mean, that's another thing that Garth balanced in this movie. You know, our third act. Another thing, yes, this film's about joy and about having big dreams and the hustle you have to do, but it's also about resurrection. The Clay Galloway character, that's a very more mature little line of storytelling that Garth put into this with the Clay Galloway character that Bono plays. Mm-hmm. Rebirth, resurrection, someone who had it, lost it, and then how do you bring him back in? Whereas our A story is just, we got to get in. We got to put on the show. You got to give us a chance. Just press record on us one time. Let us try and make it for the first time.
That's wonderful. All right, so everybody, please see Sing 2. It's now out on video on demand. The first Sing film taught audiences of children and adults alike to conquer their fears, stop worrying about what could go wrong or what others might think. It taught viewers to be true to themselves, to dream big, to give into the music, and just sing. Thank you both so much for your time with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Alan.
Lots of love, everybody. Cheers, Adam. Cheers, Matthew.
I'm a couple hours behind you, but I'll be there, bud. Always enjoy it.
Cheers.
As you often say, any time spent with Garth Jennings, you get younger.